So my name is Benjamens. I am a healthcare director working at UPCO Worldwide. I'm moderating this next session on digital health. We've been hearing about blockchain for quite a while, but it's still not very well understood by everybody, and also more, of course, what the implications or possibilities are for healthcare. Today, we want to talk a bit more about the concrete opportunities and challenges, and as we are in the European Parliament, also it would be good to explore a little bit about what are the required policy actions to further develop this in the near future. We are fortunate to have with us today a group of international leading policymakers and thought leaders on this matter. I'm about to ask them to introduce themselves, but first I want to hand over to MEP Boni. I don't know if you require an introduction to this crowd, but I guess it's safe to say that you are one of the most digital savvy members of the European Parliament. You've been focusing a lot on digital health, and yeah, I would like to ask if you have a few opening statements as host of this panel.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for this concept, this idea to organize the whole day on blockchain. Because, as I know, there are many discussions, there are many debates today, and it is very important to understand what kind of solutions the blockchain can bring to us when we are talking about ICT development, when we are talking about digital revolution. It's obvious that when we are talking about digital health, e-health, the new paradigm at the area of healthcare, due to possibilities opened by digital technologies, we need to focus on some issues. Firstly, it's how to process the data and how to use the data. Secondly, how to change the model and prepare the diagnosis much more oriented on real problems important for patients. I think it's important to understand that when we know more about the patient, when we know more due to real-time monitoring the state of health, some analysis of genetic conditions and so on, so we can prepare the better therapies. Better therapies in the e-health area means personalized therapies, personalized medicine, personalized medical services. And I think it's very, very important. It's changing the relations between patient and physician and doctor. It's changing the healthcare paradigm because now in the tradition, it's clear that we are reacting on some diseases and symptoms of diseases, but it should be much more focused on prevention. What is the role of the blockchain? When we want to exchange health information and make it much more secure and make the situation much more complex, we can use blockchain networks and blockchain solutions. Because this technology can develop the potential to connect fragmented systems to generate insights and give the better access of value of care. So it's creating efficiency. On the other hand, we need to understand that this is a, if I can say, starting point for blockchain. So it means that we need to work on adoption and implementation of blockchains, and it will be the evolution rather than revolution. But I'm ready to put the question, yes, because probably it could be also, on the one hand, this is very disruptive. On the other hand, it could be much more faster and go in the way which will be much more revolutionary. It's very important to understand how important the new understanding of the role of cloud will be when we will use the blockchain, because it will allow us to analyze aggregated records, and on the other hand, it's the new possibility to organize the streamlined data flows across stakeholders, which is very important because it's opening the possibility for remote consultations and also using for some advices, not only, if I can say, human doctors, but also to open the artificial intelligence to be much more open for machine learning, for new model of conversation between patient and machine learning. With all requirements, ethical and so on, patient should know with whom he is talking about his health. On the other hand, I think that this is also very important to understand that blockchain probably will combine in a much more proper way some efforts important for monitoring of the state of health and the combination, the monitoring and analysis by using artificial intelligence and machine learning. At the end, it's clear that we need to combine technological achievements and some requirements and the feeling of patients which are important for his their feeling of security and privacy protection. And I think we need to focus on both. There is no one area so we can say, okay, we need to protect privacy, we need to protect security, but we need to be cautious with the development of technologies. We need to go hand in hand, shoulder in shoulder, when we want to achieve some new goals. And as you know, we have GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, in the European Union. We need to put some new questions related to GDPR and in the future to the e-privacy, because e-privacy will describe in the future the model of transferring of data. And I think it will be very important not to kill the possibilities of processing the data, so the legislation should be much more open than we have discussed in the first version in the European Parliament. And I hope that we will come back in the next term to this debate and it will be much more open for data processing. It is important for creating the trust, because the e-health requires the new model of trust between patients and physicians. The new technologies require also to build the trust between all users and the technologies. And in the blockchain, we can organize it in the complex way. And on the other hand, also we can make it much more oriented for digital trust built by design. Also, we need to remember that blockchain means, very often in discussions it's clear, decentralization. And also it is decentralization of data, and some people are saying that now data, medical data belongs to patients, but enforcing transparency with blockchain technologies may be helpful to create the new model of and much more the readiness among patients to use the data, because they will feel that it will be secure and protected. And of course, I think that blockchain will create stronger interoperability, not only at the national level, but generally. And when we are talking about adaptation of electronic medical records in last 10 years, it's clear that every hospital seems to have its own vendor. But sharing and distributing patient medical data from one provider to the another is now inefficient. Blockchain network can create the new possibilities and make it much more possibility. So finally, we need to solve interoperability problems, and blockchain it's ready to help us, and also I think that it will be much more easier to create interoperable solutions using blockchain models. It's also very important that blockchain will create the special value chain and relation chain between all stakeholders, researchers, patients, healthcare practitioners, and the access to the data stored in database, stored in this cloud, stored in networks will be much more open, and we can use those data. And also I think it is important that data stored in platforms can be quickly distributed into servers in different areas without single failure or disaster. The more transactions we will have, and it's clear that the more transactions that happen with the data, the higher the value of the network will be. So I think that we are at the beginning on the one hand, so we need to discuss what is needed when we are talking about the framework. And when I'm talking about the framework, it doesn't mean strong legislation, because I have a little distance to the strong legislation because technologies are developing much more fastly than our legislation. So I think that we need to be much more open for light models of legislation, for code of conduct, for co-legislation, self-legislation, self-regulation, and so on and so on. And I think that today's discussion will open the area of the blockchain technologies for e-health. We are working on the communication done by the Commission, and we are working on the framework for the future European Parliament, how to use and how to build a strong background for e-health, also using blockchain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boni. It's clear that you give it a lot of thought, and let's see and hear from the panelists if they agree with everything you said, and maybe they have some additional questions for you about what is required from the members of the European Parliament. Now I would like to move over to the panelists and ask them quickly to introduce themselves and share a few initial thoughts about the topic from their specific perspective. I wanted to keep it very short, so about 5 minutes, but we lost one panelist on the Belgium highway this morning. Mr. Mark Hennessy couldn't join in the end. That means that you have a little bit of extra time, so 1 more minute, so that's maybe a positive effect of that. I want to start with and invite Mr. Andrzej Rys to share his views on a potential future blockchain-driven healthcare system. Maybe from the perspective of your current position as Director responsible for health systems, medical products and innovation at DG Sanco, but perhaps also from your personal perspective as a medical doctor specialized in radiology and public health.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So you introduced me already. So yes, my job in the European Commission is working in DG Santé, which is in my department. We work on the health system, but also medical products like authorization of medicines. So I can also have a few words about the data and R&D pipeline, which already Michał referred. I think it's it's clear on paper, when you read this, the blockchain technology has potential to bring to the changes in healthcare sector. You feel this. But I think I'm happy that I am participating in this meeting, because it's maybe the next step to open eye to the potential users of this technology. Because my call is that we have to avoid the feeling of black box. The people, you bring this technology to physicians or to hospital managers or reimbursement agencies, and you said, okay, it's going to work. It's if my son, who is one of my 3 children in IT business, he said, try to explain me, how this working. I said, wow, it's working, but what is in? The old terms he used, they were completely foreign to me. So I'm not, new in the digital world. So So I think it's a first step to explain this is not magic solution, is not black box, because what I think health professionals hate, that you bring the solution and you don't explain what is this. So I think this will be my first remark before I go to other important things. When you see this again from the concept of healthcare today, you know, there are a lot of ideas that are very close to the heart of the policymakers. You know, just mention transparency. It's almost in every policy paper we develop around the globe. Decentralization, again, you know, is the nature of the health system. Accountability, it's again, you know, so it's addressed basically the all just mentioned those three challenges in the health sector. But when we go to the so what can bring this magic solution, an interesting solution to the citizens, I think this is something already was mentioned by Michał. It's the fragmented health data. This is what we hear, you know, when you go to the GP offices. I don't have access to the hospital record, and I would like to help you, but I didn't see your like ECG exam or spirometry exam or your blood test. So you go again to get the blood test because I don't trust, you know, this data even there on the paper. So the related data to the individuals are there in the system, but they are you know completely fragmented. So it looks like the stitching this data together, that this technology can help and build this as we call the health profile as stitching, you know, glue stitching. The other problem is a lack of citizens' secure access to their own health data. You know, when we did a study last year before we published our communication on digital health and care, we understood the citizens basically they don't have problem to share data. You know, we see kind of rather positive outcome, but of course then the things are coming. You know, trust and security, and of course, you know, this is what individuals are happy to grant, but they also like to make sure that the first access is easy for them, but the data are also secured. So I think this is what we see as a commission, as a prerequisite of this game change. Lack of interoperability. This is other problem in the health system. So we know this. It's so the currently transfer of data between clinicians and the related actors is very difficult. Blockchain may help, but also we cannot bring the solution without work done by the healthcare professionals themselves. You know, this is not that we employ technology if, for example, it's not agreed in the professional cycle that there is a standard of communication. And I give you an example. We try to see, for example, how you see how many transactions you can see in the radiology field, like in my field. So in one country, the way they pay for radiology services is generating almost 3,000 codes, transaction codes. In other country, when they have the block approach, you have 40. So you know, so where is the distance? Of course, you know, especially when you start to this transaction, you know, between different providers and payers, you know, it's going a great nightmare. So secure and dynamic consent, I think this is for the transfer of health data. This blockchain again, you know, seems like a solution. So of course, it's attracting our interest, and if this transfer can be granted by patients, and the consent could be modified, withdraw as well, recorded if needed. This again is giving the potential of this technology to the healthcare. Another point, if those things will work, I think the patients, because we spoke healthcare professionals, but I think patients, citizens, you know, he or she is the supporter, because if the trust is the issue, if the access is the issue, if my rights are an issue, of course I can support. The last point of the benefit of this technology, which we really feel, you know, study all kinds of documents with my team, is the management, you know, and we just recently, last week, published jointly with OECD report about health in glass. It's a part of our communication around the State in Health EU. And one of we try always select, two topics. One was mental health, but the other one was about the waste in healthcare. And of course, those of you working in the health system, you know that sometimes in the hospital, managers are surprised when you do study that, according to different articles I have seen, up to 20% of medical devices, they are not authorized to be in the hospital. They're not that you cannot use them, but simply they're coming to different routes, or they're not used, or they're reused, and so on. So even the supply chain, is an issue. I have seen the study in the Massachusetts hospital when they Mass General when they showed that you can increase and reduce the cost of operational theater by simply better management. So you don't need to spend more money. You can also reduce or allocate, some savings. So savings money is a big issue, or wise reallocation is a issue. So this may be something we can also put on the. Of course, the number of payers will also see this technology also as a way to reduce the frauds, in the system, because there is also clearly the frauds, the way to make money not the correct way. So this technology, combining medical and financial transaction, can help. But a bit about the kind of difficulties we are facing when we study this approach. The first, I think that the cautious is that, as I already said, to understand, how this make with the transformation, because this is, I think, critical. Second is how we address the privacy concerns, and how this can help with this, because the wrong direction happen when people will say, okay, this technology is going opposite way than promised, so this is what, of course, we have to avoid. Already was mentioned about the GDPR and the right to erase, how this will work, this should be also explained, because we know now access is possible, transparency is possible, but for example, a right to erase is working in this system or not. This was a bit unclear to me, trying to understand better. Decentralization framework also is under GDPR is also quite dynamic issue, because who is the controller and who is the processor in this system. I think would be very, very interesting for me to understand, because it's very difficult. And finally, the privacy sensitive data needs to be preserved at all costs, because the trust lost, rebuild will be very, very difficult. What is the next step? Creativity of the policy framework, soft regulations, the experiments, pilots we see them already going on in few countries. They are still on the very small scale, but I think it's good, because if they will work, I hear from one government they're ready to scale up, but at first they would like to try with the small transactions and medical evidence, which they hope it will not harm if something goes wrong. Clever approach. And then finally, we should explain, what will bring, what kind of efficacy in the system this will bring, and I don't like to kind of balance between the money, efficacy, cost saving, waste management in the healthcare sector against this transparency, accountability, and citizen rights, because they are both important on the same level. But I think it's good to discuss this, because I think this is the trick which way blockchain make blockchain. So, thank you.
Thank you, Andrzej. I think we heard a lot already about the potential and the concerns of this technology. So I think it's time to listen to the people that are working on the solutions. And I wanted to start with Frank Ricotta. He's the CEO of Burst IQ, a company providing end-to-end enablement of blockchain-based health application services. So I would like to ask if you can explain briefly what this exactly means, and how you believe blockchain, from your perspective, will impact the health sector, and maybe also confirm or deny whether or not it addresses some of the concerns that Mr. Boni and Andrzej expressed now.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on the panel. I'm excited to be here. So, and thank you for the introduction. So let's take a step back in terms of what is the broader impact potential of blockchain? Because I started Burst IQ 3.5 years ago. Blockchain was a fundamental building block of what we set out to do. And why was that? Well, we think there's a broader need, and that is providing more of a universal health equity and access. It's just not about taking medical records and putting them on a blockchain. It's providing a whole new kind of access economy for health and health services by empowering the individual. And really at the core of that is data. Allowing an individual own and control their data and to gain value from their data in terms of how they interact with their care providers, how they can use that data to live a better and more healthier life, and even potentially monetizing it. Because at the end of the day, data really is the currency of digital health. Everybody wants to own it because they know it's extremely valuable. New companies are generated every day to generate more of it. Researchers are hungry for data to produce new and innovative healthcare and treatments. But we're still at this fundamental root cause that individuals have a hard time accessing it and let alone understanding it to use it in a productive way. And that's the problem we set out to solve. There's no other industry within health, and health really isn't one industry. There's a lot of verticals within the healthcare space. On one end, you have large hospitals and systems and doctors and physicians and other care providers. On the other end, you have pharmaceuticals and biotech companies, and in between, you have this whole plethora of digital health service providers addressing individual needs at different levels, from dealing with chronic conditions, which, by the way, 80% of all 80% of all money spent in health is really associated to chronic conditions: diabetes, heart disease, blood pressure, etc. What's missing is this unification across this notion of connectivity, of connecting all these little data islands in a way that makes sense. And that's really where blockchain fits, is in providing the roads and bridges between all these various dimensions within the healthcare community. So some of the things I want to address is, I really do strongly believe in this notion in the transition to personalized or person-centric medicine. I think that is really the true tipping point in this whole conversation. And in my view, really a health singularity. And that's a convergence of all these these new and emerging precision medicine tests that address really the primary determinants of health. How I'm built as a person, my genetics or genomes, how my body's functioning as phenome and cellular type tests, as well as kind of these second tier data, all these next generation of IoT devices. I'm not talking just about a Fitbit that counts your steps. I'm talking about things that really provide quantitative measurements of how your body's working or how you're living in a certain way. Because let's face it, 99.999% of our lives are lived outside of a clinical environment. We go see a doctor or physician when something's wrong, and the systems are all set up to deal with, a patient encounter, not a person's health journey and health profile. Yes, there are really good doctors out there that really strive to do that, but the system itself, in terms of how it works, how people get paid within the systems, are all dealt with sick care, not helping somebody live a nice healthy journey or building a journey map with their health profile. And I think that's where blockchain comes in. Blockchain provides this amazing longitudinal view of a person. It makes the quantified self become a reality. And in that, it enables us to, again, interact with our care providers in new and meaningful ways, in virtualized access, because I have a better view of who we are as a person, without me having to sit in front of them and poking me with a needle. It allows me to really move across different types of care providers. we're going to see 16 doctors over the course of our lifetime, as an example. And so the need for really being able to present ourselves as a person is becoming more of a necessity to deal with these burgeoning costs within the health systems. And I don't care where you are in the world, there's still some fundamental problems. I hear, well, the U.S. is different than Europe, which is, different than Asia. To some degrees, I believe that's true from a health delivery system. In other ways, I don't. I mean, I still hear the same stories in single-payer systems about the ability to share data across care boundaries or across the entire care continuum. I still hear the same stories about people, horror stories about people getting the type of care they really need, or really, dealing with the right kind of medication that's suited for themselves. Let's realize half the population of those that are 60 years or older are on the wrong medication or the wrong kind of drug cocktail. Why? Because they'll see one doctor and then another doctor, then a third doctor, all prescribe them something different. And then when you get in emerging growth areas of the world, they don't have access to the same kind of care or the same kind of opportunities. And I'm going to throw this out just from a clinical trial perspective. 90+% of all clinical trials are in North America and Western Europe. I don't think we have 90% of the population. There's quite a diversity that we're just not touching at this point in time, that a system like this would enable the next generation or next type of clinical trials, more virtual trials. They don't have to be specific, where experts truly can collaborate without the fear of compromising underlying intellectual property or ownership of their research, which I think can be very, very powerful. So from a Burst IQ perspective, this is where we come in. When we say we're a blockchain enablement platform, really what we are is we're a network of care providers, businesses, small and large, connected with each other, and all those focused in the health space, and with the people they serve. That's what our intent is. That's what our broader mission is. And unlike most blockchain companies, we're well beyond talking about a lot of use cases. We've been actively in production with large hospital systems now for almost a year. One of our cornerstone clients has driven 20% of their cost of surgical operations out of their system. That's a lot, considering most hospitals, half the cost of most hospitals are centered around surgical operations. So it's either a reduction of cost or an increase of capacity. That's amazing, right? And on the other side, we have biotech and pharma companies dealing with improving supply chain and dealing with fraud and eliminating fraud. But from our perspective, we're not all those applications. Burst IQ is not all those applications. We focus on making data usable for those applications and transportable across those applications, which is really one of the wicked problems in health. Data is probably the #1 problem in health and health systems, regardless of where you live. And if we make a small dent in that and we change the whole access economy and access method for health and health services, I think we've done a great benefit for society.
Thank you. That was a lot of information. I think you are trying to get in that black box, what Andrzej spoke about, and make that usable.
That's right.
That's
And I think it's important to point out. Sorry, I'm jumping back in. Is that we talk about blockchain as one thing. Blockchain is not one thing. Yes, it's a technology, and there's lots of different ways to implement the technology. And I'm sure the technologists in this room each have their own view of which one's the best. But really, blockchain is more of a way of doing things, and that's really more of a way. It's talking about democratization or enabling individuals and individual liberties in a way that's productive for society. And government and legislation and regulatory bodies all have a role to play in all of this, not from the standpoint of directing how the technology itself evolves, but in what they're supposed to do, which is to protect us as citizens and to provide safe environments for us to live our lives.
Thank you. That brings us to our last panelists. I think in the beginning we spoke about the need for healthcare professionals or people with a medical background to understand better the technology. I think that it's a good way to go through you, Alex, Cahana, to share with us your journey and how you ended up working on blockchain.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for APCO for having this important discussion. If blockchain in general is a sideline discussion, then blockchain in healthcare is even less, and the interest becomes even more pointed. I do want to say a few words about my unusual journey, because that will explain also why my focus is on blockchain. And a lot of problems were brought up in the last half an hour. I'll just try and focus it on 4 main messages, because for people who don't live blockchain on a daily basis, this could be dizzying. I write in my Medium moniker that I lived 4 lives in one, which means not only that I'm old, but also I know the dirty little secrets of each life. And so the first life was in the military, saying not only that we're mission-driven and data-driven and situation-aware, but really we understand that none of us is as good as all of us. So this whole concept of decentralization is natural. This whole idea of community building, this whole idea of interdependence is something that is second to none. I've been, since medical school, 30 years, so I did not graduate thinking that I'll be a leader in the crypto health field. I built 4 pain departments in my career, so it's safe to say that I'm familiar. It was in 3 different countries that I'm familiar with global health systems, both as a provider, as a patient advocate, as someone who's done laboratory research, bed research, familiar with working with insurance companies, with vendors, with the industry. I was sucked in the United States into the opioid epidemic, which is a total failure of healthcare delivery. And so as we speak here, I want to remind you that every 7 minutes someone dies from an overdose, so we need to move a little bit more gingerly on solutions. That exposed me to the regulatory and legal aspects of it, and I became a subject matter expert for the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration. So systems thinking and systems design. And in the last 10 years, I've been consulting investment firms on digiceuticals or digital solutions. And when I, in 2014, was frustrated like everyone, not understanding what blockchain was, then spent a couple of 1,000 hours diving into it, and became, people said, a crypto influencer. I like to think myself more as a crypto Sherpa, you know, helping people get down from the mountain and not, you know, killing themselves on the way down. I'm currently a head of the Crypto Health Advisory at Crypto Oracle, which is a VC crypto fund. And I've seen dozens, if not hundreds, of different healthcare and healthcare-related projects that come to me for advice. So I'm paid to tell them that what they're doing is nonsense. And it gives me a great grasp. And I invite you to read my posts on Medium that will give you an insight into these thoughts. There are 4 things that I would like kind of to focus on, because the panelists mentioned a lot of important things. The reason for the first is description. People don't explain well blockchain. The #1 reason that I think we don't explain well blockchain is because we describe it. So when you say to someone, what is water? And they say water is H2O. If you don't know what H is and you don't know what O is, it's like saying water is WATER. So we don't explain blockchain. There's a public ledger, or we use words that were invented in the last 2 years. It's meaningless. And so we need to go into the beginnings of blockchain to understand the intention behind it. And so when we go to Satoshi Nakamoto's Genesis block and we read the VEX version of it, in it, between the numbers of that protocol, he put in the chancellor bailed again RBC. So in his mind, the whole idea of digital money is to overcome or to decrease the predatory practices of centralized organizations. So this is really what it's all about. It's all about us today living in a world that we are surrounded by centralized institutions that are using our data, our money, our information without our explicit consent in a way that is not beneficial to us. So that's one thing. The second thing is that because data is the currency that we talk about in healthcare, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about security, we talk about privacy. What we don't talk about enough is ownership. And so when 23andMe goes and sells my information for $300 million and I don't get anything from it, that is not okay. When Facebook does what it does, that is not okay. So it's about the ownership. Yes, military-grade encryption is really excited. Zero-knowledge proof is excited. There's a whole host. If you're a technologist, you can get really aroused by all the things that are happening. But it's really about empowerment, about ownership, and it is rooted in elements of dignity, human dignity, and empathy. The third thing that I would want to say, and I've said this a couple of times in Congress and in different testimonials that I gave, when people ask what is the problem of healthcare, we can spend a whole day of what the problems are. Anywhere from saying that we don't care about health and that's the problem of healthcare. The fundamental problem, in my opinion, is that we are brought up in a system where we are health service consumers instead of health producers. So we just do stuff. We go and we do tests and we take pills and we do a whole bunch of things, okay, and we consume more and more of it, and the mortality actually, or life expectancy in the United States has been decreasing the third year in a row. So this is a low value proposition business. And so we need to transform patients from health consumers, from passive health consumers to health producers. Now, what blockchain brings is not just the quantified self and what Frank was talking about, knowing our own data and actually engaging in preventative healthy behaviors, but it's also creating wealth that suddenly through different reward mechanisms, be it on utility tokens or security tokens, I can actually make money from being healthy. And so data, health data, is like money. It's mine. I can access it whenever I want, for whatever reason. I need to keep it in a safe wallet. And if my expectation is that its value will accrue with time, then also I can donate it and I can inherit it. And this brings me to my last point, and that is that it is mine. And this David brought up in his historical review in the previous panel, where some of us are old enough to remember that we grew up in an environment that we wouldn't speak unless spoken to as kids. We did not have expectations to any participatory reality. Okay, we lived in a democracy maybe, but we lived in an authoritative mindset where someone who was older than you would speak and you would not. And then somewhere, I don't know, it was the 80s, Reagan, Thatcher, deregulation, internet, democratization of knowledge, suddenly it became human-centric, patient-centric, citizen-centric, student-centric. It was not nice to tell to people what to do. But it's not patient-centric anymore because 2008 happened. And this representative democracy, where our representatives did not represent us, but represented their own needs and their own interests, have created a movement of holacracy, of self-assembling teams that we are doing stuff. I didn't fit a job description. David didn't fit a job. No, we went and had an urge, woke up, asked, do you want to help me? Do you want to help me? And he said, fine. And this is the world that's now human-driven. It's student-driven. It's citizen-driven. And this is what blockchain does, this technology that works together, of course, with other technologies, and it's not on its own, but it allows us, it gives us the tool to drive all this.
I think now that we know who you are, where you're coming from, and what you're working on, it's good to start with having a panel discussion. I would like to invite everybody to participate. So if you have a question or a comment, please indicate that by raising your hand.
My name is David Siegel. I'm a regulatory refugee from the United States living in London. And I want to ask Frank, I imagine the data in healthcare is doubling every 18 months or something like that, just like it is everywhere else, roughly, right? And you mentioned Fitbit and a bunch of other sort of, quantified itself. I'm concerned about rigorous nonsense. I'm concerned that there's lousy data everywhere and it's getting more and more, and people are just generating data for data's sake, and your Fitbit doesn't have anything to do with your personal health at all, with the outcomes. Can you address a little bit about like how we know what data is any good or use?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, because when you get an overplethora of data, then what's meaningful and what's not meaningful. And this is where the next component comes in, and some of it you guys addressed in the previous panel, which is some aspect of machine learning and intelligence that make it relevant. So I think a lot of the existing IoT space is irrelevant, personally, because as I said, most people that have the Fitbit stop using it after 6 months. Why? I don't know, maybe they don't hit their 10,000 steps and they get frustrated, or is it that meaningful? But I do think the next round of things are going to be very meaningful. Take genomic tests and reading some of the markers from genomic tests on my metabolic rate for certain medications. I think that's meaningful. I think reading some of the proteomics type tests in terms of how my body's functioning, I think that becomes very meaningful, but it needs an interpretation. Me as an individual, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist from that perspective, so it needs a level of interpretation and understanding. But the quantity of those kind of data, just one proteomics read, is really the equivalent inside to doing a high fidelity genome sequence. And I'm going to do those pretty regular now. And then with the advent of new techniques to draw blood, these little micro draws that make it a little easier to do that, so I don't have to go into the doc and get poked with a needle. So you're going to see more true quantitative measures, and I think some of the IoT devices are going to be true quantitative measures. And we've seen some of this, although it's not been productized on a broad scale. A continuous measurement of blood sugar, with contacts, that's very valuable. Things that IoT devices you may swallow and provide some internal measurements become very valuable. So I just think we're just seeing the start of what's valuable, but it's more than doubling every year, by the way, on data. It's almost like a 10x on the healthcare side of life. And I will contend that most data in current health records are meaningless for you going forward. So rather than trying to pull it all out and stick it in a blockchain, I say we take a starting point with this next generation of health and use that as a basis to move forward. And then, if we can get some of that old stuff in, awesome, that's great, let's do that. Let me see my cholesterol read for the last 20 years. That would be great. I'm not sure how relevant it is for me tomorrow just yet.
I would like to add also, I'll be even more provocative in saying, yes, obviously machine learning will refine our understandings, but even as we speak now, we quite understand what are the questions that need to be asked. And if we look at the bulk of the burden of diseases that are out there, at least in the OECD countries, and now also permeating into developing countries, we're talking about heart disease, hypertension, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, all these lifestyle modifiable diseases, and then we included to that mental health and pain and alcohol and smoking and so on. And for the bulk of chronic lifestyle modifiable diseases, there are only two questions that have been found to be correlators to your life. And that is one, your zip code, and your second is the presence or absence of adverse childhood events. So I'm not saying that genomics and phenomics and proteomics or whatever omics are not a thing and that we don't need to do it, because we'll do it for more emotional reasons, because we have this fetish towards numbers, that we feel more secure if we know all this, and we'll figure out some optimization technology to, you know, sift away the stuff that is noise. But the real question, okay, is not really complicated, that it's the social determinants of health. People have clean water, clean air, green parks. Is the only vegetable in our neighborhood ketchup? All these kind of things actually will determine life expectancy.
Just, I like it. You know, I love the concept of moving from health services consumer to the health producers, as you rightly said. But following your question and discussion around the data, yeah, it's in one hand, you know, how to manage this capital of health, you know, with all this information, education, you know, air quality, water, and so on, against the situation that still, you know, the small percentage of citizens are chronic patients, so they are in the constant interaction with the healthcare sector, you know, because of the one or other diagnosis. So I think that we always will deal with one concept, which is try to get the data which help us to maintain the health capital, which Alex explained is a good to have and maintain, even to be paid for this. It's a very interesting concept as well, which we explored, by the way, by Singapore some years ago on the health account concept. You know, this is something we have seen. And then we go to the situation, the interaction with data monitoring. We see now in the kind of quite big network of clinicians in the European Reference Network. We have thousands of clinics connected, that each patient coming with a rare diseases case, it's just mountain of data. And of course, you know, this data should exist and should be discussed and assessed to get the right diagnosis, because even if you have great capital, health capital, you still may have very serious disease which you have to manage with a huge number of data. But of course, the next problem is coming with all the sensors, data, all nice monitors we can register, you know, every day our heartbeat, our osteoporosis, glucose, whatever. But how those data can be analyzed and whether it makes sense, this is something also maybe we should not forget about medical professions and the standards and guidelines. So far I don't believe that there is a complete change in the world that machines will tell us, you know, what to do with some medical problems, because we still need human touch. Maybe not in the next 10 years, but so now I don't believe the machines will answer all questions.
Just only one addition. We need to remember about the quality of data, because we are living in the time in which we are collecting all kinds of data, but I think it should be related to the type of the disease. It should be related to the possibility to compare the data. So some standards are very important. And the quality of data is also related to the complexity of data. In some diseases, as it was mentioned when we are talking about some mental diseases and so on, the lifestyle information, lifestyle data are very important. In some, much more important are the data of different types. Yes? So we need to separate the ways and to differentiate. But on the other hand, when we are talking about this quality of data, we need to remember about the message from the General Data Protection Regulation, which means when we are starting to process the data, legitimacy. It should be based on legitimacy. Yes? And of course, I think if we will have much more precise described the needs and expectations related to data, we can start not only to go this way of patient-centric, and as you have said, it's very inspiring, patient-driven, yes, with participation of patients, but also I think it will be much more clear what does it mean, not only my control over my data, but also my openness for donating data. In addition, so I think it's also related to the knowledge of what kind of data are qualified and are needed for the real research, and after that real diagnosis, and after that support and help with therapy.
Would you like to respond to this question?
No, I actually have a different one.
Okay, well, let me just then finalize this question. I think very interesting to hear that, we're looking at data as the fuel, what we put in the blockchain. We talked about the importance of having the data from nurture and nature. And I think it's a legitimate question that was asked. And I think that we agree that the current generation of tools may not be everything we need, but it's in development, and the next generation of tools will probably give us a more reliable source of input for blockchain. Just go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Maria Minarikova. I'm from Fetch AI. We're an AI blockchain and digital economics company based in Cambridge. And I actually have a question because I've been to Healthcare Unblocked in London. I listened to you there. We met there. I'm here, and I'm just going to read. I'm not from Estonia. I'm from Slovakia originally. I live in the UK. But I just want to read something about Estonia. And it says on the website here, each person in Estonia that has visited a doctor has an online e-health record that can be tracked. Identified by the electronic ID card, the health information is kept completely secure and at the same time accessible to authorized individuals. KSI blockchain technology is being tested for the system and will be implemented in the near future to ensure data integrity and mitigate internal threats to the data. And I have 3 statistics here out of 4. 95% of health data is digitized. 99% of prescriptions are digital, and 100% of electronic billing in healthcare is there. So how come they're not here? Why are we not having them here in this panel discussing what they have done? They're far advanced. I think they're probably the most advanced country in Europe that has digitized almost everything, pretty much. They're using a certain kind of blockchain. It's not public as far as I know, but still, they have so much more experience. Why don't we have them here?
Well, they're not here because they couldn't come. We did definitely invite them and target them. On the other hand, I can say that we spoke to them about this, and they also admitted that, yes, they may be the leading country in that sense, but they are also a relatively smaller country. So it's they have a different starting point than other countries. But yes, it would be great to have them here. I know that they're leading the discussions here in the institutions as well. So they're already kind of very, very much involved in the existing policy efforts. But yes, and also I think that, yes, they advanced a great bit, but they also have still a lot of barriers they need to overcome as well in terms of ownership and access of the blockchain. So they're, yes, it sounds very good, but they're also not 100% there yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'm sure they're not 100% yet, but I think they're farther than we are, all of us in this room probably, where we want to be. And I understand they're a smaller country, but you start with a pilot. Always you start with something small and then you scale up. So I think it would be really helpful to all of us to understand what they have done, what kind of issues they have encountered, how they have overcome them, and then learn from that and together build something that's going to work and scale up.
Yeah, I think it's also a very important point you make in terms of, we spoke about, yes, there may be a difference between Europe and the US and elsewhere across the globe. I think, yes, we deal with the same challenges, but I think in Europe we have additional challenges in terms of, we have so many different health systems. And yes, we may have a case study or a pilot country, but then, whatever they come up with may not be applicable in other countries. So it's an additional challenge. But
That's
Sorry.
true, and just for your information, you may be aware of that, but I think at the moment they're starting a new pilot. They will be testing the digitized, exchanging prescriptions between Estonia and Finland. So they are already involving other countries in this pilot and scaling up. So I think we should probably, thank you, it's great that you've tried, but I think perhaps in the future we should really make sure that we have somebody,
Yes,
here
we need to
from yeah, thanks.
be more
Great.
strict on that, yes. Yes, please.
I think Estonia is certainly relevant, but this is a centralized approach, and we are now trying to see what can be a decentralized approach with a different ecosystem and a different rationale for having incentives aligned. And coming back to blockchain and this element, I think we live here in the combined world. We have a great technology, which is blockchain. We have a great regulation, notwithstanding what David Siegel was saying about GDPR, which has to be implemented, which doesn't foresee explicitly the blockchain, which needs to be worked upon on this. Something which is possibly combining the GDPR and blockchain is the fact that in blockchain we can use smart contracts. Smart contracts can handle consent. The GDPR is very much about consent. And so this will be possibly a higher way of dealing with all this, and I think this is important. I am representing here a European project which is called My Health, My Data. We are working on this. But on the other hand, there is also the big question that until we find a way for really making data shareable and tradable, exchangeable, there will no be incentives for doing anything. Even the passage from data consumer to data producer implies that something like this is in place. And this is connected with another type of technology that is the privacy-preserving technologies, which go with it, because blockchain deals with transactions, but this implies using. So there are two aspects of the privacy-preserving issue there. One is the fact that you need to be allowing for data publishing in some way or another, be it pseudonymized, be it anonymized, be it as synthetic data. There must be some way there which is clear and which is GDPR compliant and very straightforward. And the other thing is that you can have data computation, which is another horizon now, through secure multi-party computation, through homomorphic encryption, which is a way of getting output results, something which gives you an answer to questions where you want to test an algorithm on a large number of data, and then you can have this on this basis. So these are the things which I think should go together. It is a game with three players. There is the GDPR, there is the blockchain with its capacity, there is privacy-preserving technology which must come together and give solutions to this.
I just want to say briefly, in both of the questions, and I just want to make everybody attentive that the discussion here is very nuanced, and there are very sophisticated considerations that are put into the fray that explain the possible barriers to adoption right now, or speak about the next steps we should wait for it to become more mainstream. I would just, because I'm a doctor at the end of the day, and I see patients, and I look at people, and I try to understand why they behave and why they say the things they say, that most of the considerations of lack of adoption pertain to the normal human reaction to change. I'm sure you're all familiar with Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of bereavement. So if anybody you hear think in the room that blockchain is not a thing, you're in stage 1, it's denial, right? If you're all upset because of all the scams and you think that 99% is just scams, you're in stage 2, which is anger. If you're starting to say, well, you know, maybe it's a small country, it's a big country, it's US, it's this, it's the with homomorphic, without, all the, we are now ICOs, STOs, all this is now stage 3, the bargaining phase. Stage 4 is depression. Oh my God, you know, we lost 97%. Let's look back to the Amazon bubble. Let's try to calm ourselves down. I think this morning we were on the greed and fear index. I don't know if you don't look at that, but we were at like 9, which is extreme panic. But again, you know, in the United States, we have reasons why to be in extreme panic. And only 5, stage 5 is the acceptance. So all what I'm trying to say is that we will continue this very sophisticated conversation because it is important, because we are the specialists, and with the Estonians will be even better. But at the end of the day, the drivers for policy, when I work with 4-star generals or when I work with the representatives both in the House and the Senate, it resorts or falls on much more basic human behavior instincts that have to do with the change and understanding the non-sustainability of our current behavior. Because when my wife explains to her friends what I do, I look at her and I say, sweetheart, that is not at all what I do. But when my 12-year-old explains, I say, that's exactly what we're doing. So we are designing a world for our children, where obviously they're going to have their electronic healthcare record residing on their mobile through a distributed cloud, because it is attack resistant and sensor resistant and collusion resistant. Of course, they will receive different types of rewards, monetary and non-monetary, in order to preserve their health, or actually also when they're injured, do secondary and tertiary care. Because even when you are addicted and you are to drugs and you are in recovery, there are ways to gamify it in a sense that you can maintain and resort back to life. So all what I'm saying is that this is a great conversation, but at the end, you know, what we really need to do is not only blockchainize healthcare, but also healthify, if that's a word, the crypto space and the whole community of technologists at large.
So we're up for depression first. Thank you for that. Andrzej, Mikael, do you agree with what he said? And is this also, does it apply, you think, on this side of the Atlantic?
Yeah, maybe I can a little bit reflect on this depression and change. I think be a doctor as well, you know, I really feel that okay, patients' roles is important, you know, and I really feel that informed patients, consumers will play the game according to the rules he or she likes and so on. But now we cannot live without health professionals, you know. It's I know I am defending our profession, but I have seen this in many situations that doctors are usually the most innovative guys. They really, you know, if the new technology coming to the doctor's office, usually we grab it, we like to use. Sometimes we have all this, you know, 5 stages thinking. But most of doctors I met in my life, they are really kind of entrepreneur, ready for change. But at the same time, doctors are very conservative. And you always have this feeling, you know, and I ask time to time in the room, you know, who like to be operated by innovative or by conservative surgeon? You know, and usually people choose the conservative surgeon, who is the one who knows what he is doing, and he did this, you know, 1,000 times, and he doesn't try on me. And this is I think the complex problem in the change in the health system, because in one hand we run for technologies, in other hand we are really skeptical and conservative to use it. But at the same time, I strongly believe if we don't go, next step we will not get there. So and in full agreement, you know, that we are designing future. And I still remember, you know, many years ago, one of big corporation, when I was still in my university shoes, you know, asked me to join the global debate about the future. And this time, it was a question, you know, what will happen with the mobile phones? You know, we had them not smartphone this time. And I remember we concluded it will be the day like this, that we'll have smartphones for everything. But this time, you know, believe or not, even this big corporation the CEOs, they're quite skeptical about this. So we are also in the technology maneuver when even the big bosses, they still don't believe so. But I strongly believe, and Alex is right, it will happen, and as smartphones happen today, it will happen, and we have to just help.
And I would just briefly add that it's interesting that, at least I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but in the US there is a movement actually, it's called direct primary care, where doctors do not want to participate in the current marketplace where they have all this friction with insurance companies, and where they are creating these peer-to-peer medical and monetary transactions, some of them using cryptocurrencies, now less so, but they very much embrace this disintermediated approach that reminds them the way they think medicine should be. And there's actually a couple of projects that are like DAO, decentralized autonomous organizations for doctors, where the governance is determined by smart contracts to represent them, because currently doctors, at least in the US, do not have representative unions, and their savant societies don't actually help them out. So you're absolutely right that if your name is Dr. Hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you would want to be that kind of in that way. But I think that doctors, more than I would say hospitals or payers or the government, have that sense of urgency that this is not sustainable because their patients are not doing better and their life is miserable. I don't know, again, the numbers in Europe, but burnout suicide from burnout among physicians in the US has become a real problem. Every day, 1 to 2 doctors commit suicide. So think about it, that they would prefer to die than to rather log into their electronic health record. That is very extreme. And so to the point that the IHI, the Institute for Health Improvement, had added to better care, lower cost, better experience, the 4th point, which is to reduce doctor burnout. So they are the adopters of digital therapies and digiceuticals and in blockchain. But again, we need to explain it in a more, I would say, relevant way to them.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we want to make health personal again. It's not about data, it's not about the technology, it's really about living our lives. And we've tried so many things to force electronic health records that actually introduced more overhead, more burdens. We increased the I'm talking about in the U.S. diagnostic codes and all the other things that add administrative overhead that make it extremely frustrating for professionals to do their jobs and for me as a patient to interact, because I'm not talking to you. You're talking to a screen and I'm there for 3 minutes and then I'm out talking to somebody to pay my bill or something else. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And when we talk about blockchain, I don't know if it's 5 years, I don't know if it's 10 years from now, we're not going to even mention the word. If you go back to the start of the internet, there was a big fight over all the underlying protocols. This thing called ATMs, and I'm not talking about money machines, where all the telcos were saying, hey, this is the technology of the future. And then this little old startup technology called Ethernet and TCP/IP just overcame. Why? Because there was this broad scale community adoption. And that's what I think you see with blockchain. Yeah, is there problems in health, particularly with data? Blockchain is not suited for large complex data sets as is in terms of how it was invented and applied for cryptocurrencies and those types of digital assets and digital asset transfers. It's not suited for that, so there has to be augmented protocols. It's not suited for complex consent models when more than one person may own or have rights to a piece of data. Because doctors would still like to maintain some of your information in the health record within their files, as well as let you take some with you along the way. We still have needs for broader population health. We still have needs to deal with applying that and combining that with social economic determinants. We still have needs on a personalized basis to how that data is used and consumed in a much more efficient, meaningful way. And I'm just going to echo one thing. Technology never solves anything. It doesn't solve anything. The application of technology to a useful solution, that's what solves problems. So it's like technology doesn't solve management problems, but management can solve and work around technology issues. And that's really where we are. And it's got to be a combination of grassroots support, and I'll just use demographics in the United States, right? So we have 5,000 hospitals, we have roughly 1 to 1.2 million health professionals, and there's 300 million people, 350 million people, depending on what you're counting. Where can you effectuate most change? When I get 50 million people driving down a road and something, I guarantee the system is going to adopt. But the current system, with all its existing immune systems in place between how things get paid and how services deliver, what can I deliver, or hey, you got to do this first before I can go to there, even though I know I'm smart enough to know as a physician I should just take you right to that treatment. So that's the thing. That's the thing that some of this really allows us to begin to address and overcome in a way that provides solutions that's different and unique and innovative that enable the creativity of the primary participants in this whole ecosystem, which is you as a person and your care providers. And that's really the ultimate objective, in my opinion, and that's the goal and what blockchain can actually facilitate.
So I'm not sure if we can avoid all of those 5 stages and go directly to the stage 5 acceptance. Yes? Probably we need to go through all those. But on the other hand, I think it's very important when you have asked about the relations between European Union and United States, for example, to start stronger cooperation in global dimension. It's very important. It's related not only to healthcare area, because there are many different systems, but also it's related to the model, how we are using the data. And this is a privacy shield agreement between European Union and United States. This is our work with Japan now and South Korea on the principle of adequacy, to have also agreement related to flows of data. And I think it will be very, very important. So we need to have some global solutions when we are talking about data. It will cause probably better standardization and so on and so on. But on the other hand, what is especially important to treat and to understand that decentralization, which is the substance of blockchain, is the great opportunity. Because this decentralization is starting with participation of us as individuals. You have mentioned the consent, yes, and when you have mentioned this, those agreements and smart contracts and so on. So I think it's very important to create the area, to create the field for this decentralization and involve all partners. How to involve individuals, how to involve professionals, medical professionals, how to involve the technologies and understand that technology is not solving the problem, but we need to solve some problems. And what is a very important part of this new issue for the future is, if I can say, digital health literacy. Because we need to understand, now I think there are many problems, also among physicians, doctors, also among patients, yes? So I think we need to focus also on, in addition on that issue. And I think it's not create the situation of the 5 stage suddenly as an acceptance, yes, but I think it will be one of the stimulative factors to go in this direction.
Thank you. I think these are kind of nice closing remarks, because we are also ending our time. I think we can all agree that the blockchain, or whatever it's going to be called in the future, is here to stay. But we need to find a way to better explain it to all the stakeholders, and more what it means exactly. So not just talk about the technology, but what the outcome of the technology will be. It's also, we spoke about the need to ensure that blockchain is kind of dealt with or integrated in current and future regulation. GDPR was mentioned as possibly a nice starting point to pick up after next year's elections. Maybe with that, one final question to end the session to each of you. If you could change one thing with immediate effect to advance the potential of the technology, what would it be?
Discuss, develop, create partnerships, but not kill the development of those technologies, but redundant legislation.
Man, that's an awesome question. What one thing would I do? Well, I'm gonna echo. Let's go to stage 5 of acceptance. Which is little incremental movements make big changes over time. So, let's get some things going right now. Let's not wait for it all to evolve. Let's go trial and learn and iterate and do it again and do it again and do it again. So, not a one-size-fits-all model.
I follow Frank. Basically, it was my thought as well. I mean, we have to experiment. This thing will not happen without trial. But at the same time, I think we should share this knowledge around the globe, most probably not just here in Brussels. And finally, acceptance will come with the time. We should not kind of go against the time, because it will not happen tomorrow, but hopefully, it will come in time.
Yeah, I'm actually used to these type of questions. The military, I remember once my sergeant asked me if one thing to bring to the desert. I said I would bring a door of a car, and he said, why? I said, because if it's hot, I can open the window. But really just one thing, if there's one takeaway, is everybody can understand that the opposite of health is not disease. Because we think that the opposite of health is disease, that's why we have a disease management system. The opposite of health is isolation. That as we get sicker, our world contracts and becomes smaller and smaller until one day it's so small, we say this is not worth it. And so if we believe that the opposite of health is isolation, then the journey back to wellness is connectedness. To our family, to our friends, to our data, to our faith. We used to say Facebook, I don't say that anymore, but choose your F, but it's connectedness, it's community building. And the way I explain it to my 12-year-old is I say to her, if you take the I out of illness and you replace it with we, you get the word wellness. And so this is really what it's all about. This whole effort today is about creating a community that is interdependent, just like I said from the beginning of the talk, is because none of us is as good as all of us.
Thank you very much. I encourage everybody to take forward the discussion over lunch. Thank you very much for your attention.